Picture this. You have a job you love, but one day you arrive at work to find a report you've written is smothered in unhelpful corrections. You then discover a project that you've pioneered has been given to a colleague who knows nothing about the subject matter, all unbeknownst to you. How would this behaviour make you feel? These are things that have happened to me. And as this bullying behaviour continued, I felt increasingly isolated, devalued, and perplexed. In hindsight, I knew what was going on. But at the time, I was scared of what was going to happen next, so I started having meetings in secret to protect myself and my colleagues. Subsequently, I struggled to get out of bed. I would cry when I had to go to work and spent the weekends recovering, just putting my mask back on so I could get through the week. I went to see my GP, also a young South Asian woman like me at the time. She looked at me and said, "I'm not comfortable to sign you off work. I'm concerned that's going to make your life worse." It seemed that she also knew there was no winning in this situation. Let me tell you a little bit more about the work I was doing. I was brought in as a race equality expert to spearhead new plans on race equity. I was also the only global majority woman in the department. And as time went on, this bullying just continued and continued. The people who took over my work were all white, but more importantly, they had no expertise or experience in race equity. They subtly, over a number of months, created a degrading and demoralising environment for me by excluding me from work meetings, denying me access to training, and leaving me out of work gatherings. To be honest, I felt completely drained and felt I had nowhere to go with this but to leave. And instead of embracing the very thing that I was meant to find, as my work progressed, I was discovering institutional racism. But it was the typical scenario of labelling me as the troublemaker and protecting the system. But maybe you're thinking, wait a second, Leyla, maybe you just weren't very good at your job. I knew that wasn't the case, as the previous manager had not only been empowering, but also supportive. The problems began when this new manager started. She seemed very threatened about me. She seemed very threatened by me and keen to contain me. And I knew it was due to the colour of my skin. As I give these examples, you might think, well, it's white and that's happened to me. I have a disability, that's happened to me. I do understand. But in this case, I knew it was racism because my lived experience echoed the hundreds of comments I'd analysed as part of a race equity survey I just carried out. Racism has been a thread running through my life, the insidious drip, drip, drip that cannot be escaped. As we watched the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement unfold, many of us had hope. But were black squares on social media really a sign of allyship and coalition? We saw the influx of workplace diversity training. Yes, workplaces, you're standing up, you're starting to listen. I was in incredibly high demand. But what's been the legacy of all of this? Some, yes, have embraced the learning, but for others, it's been a case of, please, stop this woke training. I've had enough. I can't take any more. I haven't got time for this nonsense because I'm not racist. Let's delve deeper into this, shall we? Modern racism in UK workplaces is highly unlikely to be people standing outside their place of work with placards saying X group go home. Racism nowadays is sophisticated and it's integrated into daily life through language, assumptions, and the media we consume. And we can never know what it's like to stand in someone's shoes and the racialized experience that they've had. And I'm going to summarise racism at 3 levels: the individual, the institutional, and the structural. Firstly, the individual level. People say, I'm not racist, I'm a good person, I don't use bad language, I have a black friend. But we can all be complicit through silent bystanding, enacting microaggressions, and thus creating environments that exclude. We then have the institutional level. This is policies, practices, and procedures that are rooted in good case law and management, but applied inconsistently. The UK press recently highlighted that Black and Asian doctors are disproportionately more likely to face fitness to practice cases than their white peers. The Royal College of Nursing has stated that there are worse outcomes for Black and Asian health workers in terms of career progression and disciplinary action than their white counterparts. And finally, structural racism. That's racism that's woven into the fabric of society. Many of our beautiful buildings built on the back of slavery. Unequal resource allocation to schools in Black and Asian areas, and the Windrush scandal. The lack of compensation to Black communities with no real recourse to change things. Okay, so perhaps you're now thinking, well, that's great. What has it got to do with me and how does it link with mental health? If we define good mental health as being able to engage with community and society and flourish in all that you do, both personally and professionally, work is where we spend a lot of our time. If we're treated in ways that make us feel excluded, this negatively impacts our self-worth and self-confidence. And when global majority communities have to navigate this insidious racism, it plays havoc with our identity and our confidence. In 2021, the City Mental Health Alliance reported that 50% of Black and a quarter of East Asian, South Asian, and mixed race employees experienced racism in the workplace. With one employee stating, "It makes me feel like there's something wrong with me, like I'm not worthy unless I'm how they want me to be." Imagine spending 8 hours of your day being someone you are not, just in the hope that you might be accepted. Insidious racism may seem subtle, but its impacts are profound. Black colleagues being asked inappropriate questions about their hair, questions out of context about hijabs, your name being misspelt and mispronounced repeatedly. There is a lack of representation of global majority staff at senior levels in all sectors. These are people that might have trained their white counterparts who are now above them. Did you know from last year, there are no Black directors on any FTSE 100 companies? An executive search firm, Green Park, in their 2021 report, has stated that Black representation at the top of British business is unlikely to change in the near future, with in fact the leadership pipeline going from 1.4% to 0.9%. This affects the triple bottom line: people, profits, and sustainability. In 2020, Deloitte did a report that stated poor mental well-being costs UK employers up to $45 billion a year. That's 3 times the amount that NHS England spent on mental health care in the same financial year. Conversely, if we spend just £1 supporting employees' mental well-being, we see a £5 return on investment. And that's realised through reduced presenteeism, absenteeism, and staff turnover. So if we address racism in the workplace, mental health is going to be improved. Not only reducing costs, but improving livelihoods, productivity, and profits. We know that large employers do have employee assistance programs and counselling hotlines. While this is vital, this might not be the best initiative for the plethora of global majority communities. Why not? Because they're solely based on Western talking models. But in our collective cultures, we have so many modalities at our fingertips, from art, dance, music, sound, and somatic movement, including a few yoga and Tai Chi. But remember the spiritual element too. It goes beyond survival into thriving. So if workplaces want to create culturally competent, holistic recovery models, we have to bring together culture and mental health. How? Firstly, consider cultural stigma. Who has the right to be ill and under which circumstances? Is racism at work considered a justified reason? If not, this is going to present barriers and stop people from accessing support and getting help. Secondly, the language that we use to describe how we feel and our symptoms. This will differ. For some, talking about lack of sleep is socially acceptable. For others, it won't be. It could also be a sign of depression. But how is this cue recognised and widely understood? Thirdly, community support. We know that any kind of recovery journey is much smoother when we have empathy and we're listened to from those around us. And finally, cultural pride. When we see people we identify and connect with talking about their lived experience of mental health recovery, we think if they can do it, I can do it too. So if we are to address mental ill health and racism in the workplace, we have to embrace the word discomfort. Both employers and employees have a duty of care to be anti-racist to support well-being for everyone. Well, we can do this by going back to that model. Firstly, individually, acknowledging the emotions we have and we feel around this subject, including uncertainty and guilt, and any physical sensations going through the body. Secondly, institutionally, sitting with that guilt collectively and listening to lived experiences, recognizing that by trying to rationalize things, it really doesn't make the issue disappear. Stop jumping to immediate solutions. What you've done in the past isn't necessarily going to work in the present or the future. And thirdly, societally and structurally, create a culture of upstanders where people can challenge openly and professionally in the spirit of learning to keep this agenda moving forward. This goes beyond a tick box exercise. We don't like those, do we? Remember that what makes a workplace is its people, and businesses grow through productivity. Individuals coming together to support, understand, and speak to one another. Remember, even a company CEO is an employee. Creating an anti-racist culture is an evolution. It's a journey. The most important thing that you can do is to begin. Workplaces have the opportunity to shape society for the better, to help people rise up and not be quashed. Anti-racism and mental health are interlinked. If we want to create truly anti-racist cultures, we have to examine the current systems and seek to change them, even when that feels uncomfortable. So let's get going.